What screams, "I'm bad with money"? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. My mom and sister still live together. Couldn't afford rent or their car between the two of them. Nearly had the car repossessed and were closing in on eviction until my grandmother loaned them. She explicitly said, "Pay me back when you're more stable, enough money to keep the car and stay in their apartment." 4 months later, my sister gets her tax refund for approximately $4,500. She had a kid and isn't with the father. And instead of making any effort to pay my grandmother back, pay off the car, or have any sort of emergency fund, the two of them buy an expensive purebred puppy, Airedale Terrier. They dropped over $2,000 for the dog and then spent another $500 on a crate, toys, leashes, and dog food. Less than 6 months later, they lost the car and were evicted. They moved in with my aunt, and her husband hated the dog, so it was taken to the SPCA. It wasn't even a year old. My grandmother didn't see a cent of money returned before she died. So, that. People bad with money buy things they can't afford instead of stabilizing what they already have. Story 2. Depends on what you call bad. My sister has been a saver penny pincher since childhood, which was a bit traumatic, admittedly. She is now nearing retirement, and everything she and her husband have is paid off. She isn't rich, but will have the comfortable retirement she has earned and deserves. She hates going into debt, and her cards are paid down monthly. Sounds great, right? It would be if she wasn't so completely obsessed and angered by people who don't do or think as she does, including her husband. For instance, her house and cars are modest to decent, while her friends are all buying nicer things, vacation homes, travel, and other luxury items. Most, if not all, of these things are paid for with credit, and it just drives her crazy. She is so jealous of what they have, yet so angry at how they got it. On the occasion that she and her husband join friends for a cruise or resort stay, her main concern is cost, which ruins a huge part of the trip for her every time, and monitoring how others are wasting their money never to their faces. This is just what she says to me after. Her husband used to be a pretty fun guy about 30 years ago when they met, but has become bitter and grumpy after decades of having to fight for things she deems unnecessary, like tickets to his favorite concerts or pricey sports and music memorabilia, which he's always been into. It has resulted in dishonesty between the two, which is not the kind of guy he really is, and she has grown disgusted by his need for childish hobbies and entertainment. My sister has always been a bit of a fun hater, but it's gotten to the point where it makes her, and sometimes the people around her, miserable. She lives and works in a small town and pays attention to who is getting free lunch, who is paying with food stamps at checkout, who is driving a car they can't afford, etc. She has called me and listed the items she's seen a family buying with food stamps. Can't fathom them buying Doritos and Kool-Aid. There is more than one way to be bad with money. Story 3. Looking at payment amount and not purchase price. A coworker asked one time, "This phone is $1,300, but I can get it for just $60 for 2 years. Seems like a good deal to me. $60 mo isn't that much. Should I do it?" I asked him, "Does your phone work?" "Yes." "Okay, if someone dropped $1,300 in your lap right now, is this what you would spend it on?" "No? Then it's not a good use of your money." He showed up to work the next week with the brand new phone. Another coworker wanted a Honda Ridgeline. He went to a car broker and said he wanted this truck, X years, Y miles, and his payment could only be $500 mo. He was amazed the guy got him the truck for that payment. He had no idea what his final purchase price was, what his loan term was, or what his interest rate was. All he knew was that he could afford the payment. Story 4. I use FragranceNet to make them as affordable as possible. I don't own a lot, but when I do buy, I use them. I also find the $20 minus 30 clones to be good enough in most cases. I mean, are they as good? Do they last as long? Probably not. But would anybody actually notice? Probably not. What's most noticeable is that they cost 1/10 of the price in some cases. Fragrances really can be a massive scam. Story 5. I will be honest, some of it was luck. I moved in with my then BF, now fiancé, and his grandfather. I help with expenses, but the house is paid off. This is obviously not an option for everyone, but it helps to not have to pay $1,000 per month. With all that said, my fiancé sat me down and taught me how to budget. For the first couple of months, he budgeted with me until I got the hang of it. I focused on how much I could afford to put towards my debt each month. I deleted all of the apps that I used to borrow money. I put as much as I could afford to pay, but I paid off the credit card that had the most interest on it first. I always paid well over the minimum. I don't know if any of this is helpful at all. Only debt I have now is student loan debt, and I will hopefully get that paid off through the PSLF program in a few years. I also paid off my car last year, and now I have money to put towards other things. Story 6. My family is in 20 kelvins of debt, but my mother and her brother just went on her 13th trip to Spain in the last 12 months because I can afford it. She snapped at 3 a.m. on a Sunday morning, as I caught sneaking out for another one. She thinks that I'll get a well-paying job to bail her out, which is not happening because if I gave her the money for the debt, she'd probably spend it all from when she leave the house, and on the way to the bank she works a minimum wage, 12 hours a week job, high school dropout, and has my father deported after an argument when I was young, bragging about it to this day. My older sister, a full-time college student, has a part-time job at the same place she works at and earns almost 2 times as much, minus the overtime. Story 7. My girlfriend and I keep our finances separate. Why? She once did some extra work somewhere for one day only, and this was paid well. 2 weeks later, she came up to me asking for some money. Me. Why? Her. Because I still haven't got my money for this work I had done recently. Me. So, this was a one-time thing? It should have given you extra money, but now you're out of money? Her. Yes, I already bought some things I wanted. Me. Even if they didn't pay you already? What about the money you usually earn? Turns out she literally spends everything she gets. Now she got some extra money and already spent it on even more useless. That's why we keep finance separated. I would be bankrupt if she had access to my account. Story 8. My ex-wife. Before divorce, we filed bankruptcy. 80% of the debt was in her name. Divorced over other reasons, but money was part of it. Left her the house, but she could not keep up with bills. Instead of selling, had to be foreclosed on. She met a guy, and they moved into a rented house. He maintained bills and wasn't a bad guy. I even met a few times. They broke up and again she was evicted for not paying rent and bills. Now she lives with her sister, and the kids I was paying child support for now live with me. 3 years living with her sister, and she still can't afford to move out. Story 9. The most obvious answer is an expensive car on a low or moderate income. A lot of people buy enormous pickups or luxury cars that they can't actually afford, and then complain about living paycheck to paycheck. A subtle, counterintuitive answer is thinking that having no debt at all is a virtue. A lot of low-income, unsophisticated people who got burned by credit card debt in the past go on to raise their kids to think that debt is inherently a bad thing. They'll take bizarre pride in the fact that they saved for 18 months to buy a refrigerator instead of buying it on an 18-month 0% repayment schedule. Sometimes they don't have credit cards at all, and just sort of squeeze in life with a debit card and the hideous clunker they could afford with pure cash. These people are just as bad with money. They've just fooled themselves into thinking they're virtuous for it. They're like people who won't keep knives in the kitchen because they might cut themselves trying to slice a tomato. So they just rip tomatoes apart with their bare hands when trying to make a salad. Story 10. When you get a relatively large insurance settlement after becoming permanently disabled in a way that prevents you from working and needing to live off that money for an unknown amount of time, then immediately dropping several $1,000s on redoing the entire living room in camo. Also knowing you'll be in a wheelchair for about 3 to 4 months and spending another several thousand out of that limited sum to turn the already good-sized back porch into a giant deck so you can roll around in bigger laps. Story 11. My wife has 2 friends that are the worst people I've ever met with money. Friend 1. They have a kid and are convinced that they can make it on one income because my parents could do it. The wife has a shopping addiction and is constantly buying expensive clothes for her baby and things for them. House. The husband works stocking shelves and drives Uber sometimes. They had a $70K settlement that they threw down the drain in about a year. They got evicted from their apartment for not paying and had their Cadillac that they are paying $750 a month for repossessed twice. They are now moving into a more expensive house renting. According to my rough estimate, their house and car cost more than the retail salary the sole income is making. Friend 2 also has a child, also has their, more reasonable in fairness, car repossessed many times. They moved out of state for the husband's job that he was making good money, and he lost his job for not showing up. Moved back and started begging for money constantly, asking their parents, friends, and even me. Not really a friend, but I guess she got my Venmo to request money. and got evicted because they haven't paid rent in months. They are not looking for jobs, nor are they looking for apartments. They will probably soon be homeless with their kid. A shame, because that job they moved out of state for can get up to $150K, but instead he's unemployed and she's working at a daycare part-time. Nice people, all of them. And I understand times are hard because we're still young and moved out, but I've never met 4 people so bad at handling money. Story 12. I mentioned to a coworker that I was retiring next year in January, and she asked me how. I told her it's because of our 401 Kelvins, which is very generous. We both have been at the same organization for over 25 years, and she said she has almost nothing in her 401 Kelvins. I said, "Why don't you have much in your 401 Kelvins? It's been a 200 match up to 5-year gross for 25 years. You should be loaded," she said. Every time the economy goes down, like in the dot-com crash or the housing crisis or the COVID crash, etc., I would see how low it was getting, get scared and take it out and spend the money. So basically, she paid taxes and penalties every time the stock market bottomed out when it was worth the least. She also complains how the system is against people because she can't retire when she wants to now. Story 13. My friend bought 2 rent-to-own couches. She makes over $90,000. I'm not sure how much her husband currently makes, but it's over $50,000. That's what he made before a promotion. Why? Why buy a couch like this? Their dogs tore it up after only having it for 1 month, but they owe 2 more years on the couches. The couches were less than $2,000, and they're fabric, not leather. She also bought a boat but didn't buy a trailer or a vehicle that can tow the boat. So her brother took the boat to use it, and she hasn't seen it since 3 years ago. Story 14. Owning a timeshare. Full disclosure, I own a timeshare. Laugh out loud, in my defense, my mother was going to have to file bankruptcy because of it, if I didn't take it off her hands, because they're practically unsellable even though it has a deed. So I got it for free. Not only is the original model a bad investment, but now people are paying $20,000 for vacation points that they can use anywhere, and then having to pay $1,000 a year or more on maintenance for points, which makes no sense whatsoever. At least I can pretend the $1,000 a year I pay for maintenance goes to actually maintaining the piece of property I pretend to own. Ha! But for $1,000 a week, I could find a very nice unit to rent in the same area. Definitely a bad money move. Story 15. Extreme lifestyle inflation and/or infinity chasing. I have a lot of associates who work in high-paying professional jobs that are constantly swapping out their house, car every time that they get a raise, yet they constantly complain about being short on money. A lot of them are closer to financial ruin, despite making multiple times more than I do in a mechanical optical engineering. I've also encountered a few of those gotta hustle, gotta grind, gotta monetize every walking moment of your life people. And they, in my experience, usually work so hard because they're infinity chasing. They don't actually have any tangible goals or ambitions, so make the pile bigger is all they really have going for them. All right, folks, that's a wrap. If you like more of this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below. I'll see you in the next video.